I am Ben Woskow from Atlassian's San Francisco ecosystem team, but something tells me you already knew that. Our team used to be called the San Francisco Integration Team, and for the past year, we've worked on enhancing activity streams and adding a whole new set of features and APIs to activity streams. And that is what I'll be speaking about today. So first, I'll be going over what are activity streams, and I'm going to highlight some of the new features and APIs that we've added. I'll then be discussing how to consume an activity stream and the benefits of doing so. And then we'll be going into the most interesting part of the talk, in my opinion, how to add your own custom third-party content to your activity stream, and the 3 APIs that we provide for doing so: the Activity REST API, Activity Java API, and the Provider Plugin API. And lastly, we'll be discussing Pluggable In-Stream Actions and how those can greatly enhance your user experience. So first, introduction. What is the easiest way to find activity across all of your Atlassian products? Or maybe, what's the easiest way for you to find activity for specified users or particular projects, or maybe over a given time frame? In other words, what is the easiest way to find the activity that you as a user care about? The answer is one that Chuck Norris approves of: activity streams. Activity streams allows you to have multiple data sources in a single filterable view. For an example, let's run through a quick scenario. How many of you work for a company that has employees in multiple time zones? Okay, that's pretty much everyone in the room, actually. That's more than I thought, but that's good. So as you know, just because your workday ends at a certain time doesn't mean that all the activity in your Atlassian products is ending. In fact, lots can happen while you're sleeping overnight. So in my case, our development team is in San Francisco, but our QA, is it working now? Well, I'll stick with this for now. I don't want the battery to die in 5 seconds. So our development team is in San Francisco. Our QA is in Sydney, and for good measure, we can have support tickets filed from Brazil. So all around the clock, activity is happening in our Atlassian instances. So when I arrive at work in the morning, there might be a whole new set of activity that I've missed just because I've been sleeping. So what I do when I first get to work in the morning, I look at my activity stream. I can go to the filters view, which shows me the full suite. It's kind of bled out, actually, on this projector, but the full suite of filters that I can use to configure exactly what data is showing in my activity stream. And since I'm working on the Activity Streams development project, I've selected the Activity Streams project as a filter. I can add other filters, such as a Jira issue key, a specified time frame, or a set of usernames. But for now, let's just leave it at project. Let's say for this example that I only care about Jira issues and Crucible reviews and the activity from that content. Well, I can disable the Bamboo, Confluence, and Fisheye providers, and then if I save my configuration, you'll see that only Jira and Crucible content is showing. Additionally, there might have been an issue overnight that I think was really interesting, and maybe I'd like to watch it. Well, I can do so directly from my activity stream by clicking that very bled-out hyperlink that says Watch. Doing so shows a notification that I've been successfully added as a watcher. No need to actually click through to the issue page to do that. Most of you are probably familiar with activity streams from your Jira dashboards. However, that's not the only place that you can interact with them. You can also find them on your Jira user profile pages, where all content is specific for a given user. On the Jira project page, where all content is specific for that project. And on the Jira issue page, where all content is specific for that issue. Notice, though, that not all content in this activity stream is from Jira. In fact, 3 of these 4 entries are from Crucible, and that's because these Crucible reviews, this activity relates to this Jira issue. So even though it's remote content, it's still appearing in your activity stream. This remote stream fetching within your standalone products is one of the new features we've added over the past year. An additional new feature is a greatly enhanced wallboard mode. If you're using the Jira Wallboard plugin, you can use your activity stream as a wallboard, and it'll look something like this. And for all you Confluence users, you can insert the activity streams macro in any page, blog post, or comment. So I know what you guys are all thinking right now. This is so sweet. Since you are, you can find this in Jira 4.4, Confluence 4.0, or Jira Studio. If you'd like to fetch remote content from Bamboo or Fisheye Crucible, you can do so with Bamboo 3.0 and Fisheye Crucible 2.6. Additionally, in the near future, we'll be adding it to the Atlassian plugin platform. All right, so activity streams are great, but what happens if you don't want to use the actual UI provided to you on your Jira dashboard or elsewhere? What happens if you just want to consume the activity stream and do with it as you will? Consuming an activity stream allows you to view your activity stream as an Atom feed. You might want to do this if you would like to subscribe to your feed in Google Reader or any other feed reader. Maybe you want to monitor issue status or project progress, or perhaps even monitor your company's activity without ever going to your Atlassian product. This is actually exactly what one of our own Atlassians wanted to do. Rich Maneling, one of our newest Atlassians, he's a developer advocate that'll speak tomorrow, wanted to see what was going on within our internal Confluence instance, but he didn't want to have to go into Confluence to do so. So what did he do? He wrote a very simple Chrome extension, which is shown here, which displayed all the activity within our Confluence instance. It's very simple to consume an activity stream. All you have to do is have your base URL /activity, and that'll get you going. However, if you go to that URL, you'll notice that only publicly visible data is displayed. And that's because you didn't provide, oh, I skipped a section. Just kidding. Hitting that URL will get you this Atom feed. It's XML, and it adheres to the activitystreams.ms specification. However, like I was saying, if you hit that URL, you'll notice that only publicly visible data is appearing. And that's because you didn't provide authentication. So if you provide authentication and the OAuth auth type parameter, you'll get any data that's visible to that user. Additionally, if you'd like to consume an activity stream with some filters, you can do so with other request parameters. For example, you might want to get all of the activity that Jonathan Nolan has done on this server. For more information on how to consume an activity stream, please go to our tutorial or documentation on developer.atlassian.com, or check out the sample plugin, the Chrome extension that I mentioned earlier. One tip that I'd like to mention is that we have tons and tons of documentation on everything that I'm going to speak about today. But don't worry about copying down the links. All the links will be available online, as well as my slides. And another tip is that some of the repositories that I'm going to mention here today, I believe are actually private at the moment. But don't worry about that. We'll work that out by next week. We'll make them public. All right. So let's get to the exciting part. How do you add your own content to your activity stream? This is brand new to this version of streams. What makes activity streams so awesome is the data. Without the data, you would just have this sort of shiny little box with nothing in it. It would be rather pathetic. So Jira Studio obviously has tons of data, as do all of the standalone products. Jira, Confluence, Bamboo, Fisheye, and Crucible. All wonderful data sources. But as of this version of activity streams, you're no longer limited to those data sources. You can have your own custom third-party content in the stream side by side with them. In fact, we wanted you to do that so easily and so frequently that we provided 3 different APIs to add your own content to the streams. the Activity REST API, the Activity Java API, and the Provider Plugin API. The first two, Activity REST and Activity Java, are very lightweight, very easy to get started with, and they're just very simple APIs to use. Pretty much anybody can start using them within a few minutes. However, they're not as powerful as the third option, the Provider Plugin API, which on the other hand is slightly more advanced, takes more time to get to know, but in the long run you have far more capabilities. The first two, Activity REST and Activity Java, allow you to add your own activities, execute simple filtering, such as enabling or disabling your provider or filtering by project or JIRA issue key, as well as entity association, so that you can associate your third-party entries with a JIRA issue or a Confluence space. However, if you'd like to do some things like advanced filtering, such as something that's a filtering option that's very specific to your plugin, or if you'd like to implement pluggable in-stream actions, such as that watch link that we saw earlier, then I'd highly recommend you go the route of the Provider Plugin API. So first, let's talk about the Activity REST and Java APIs. These APIs would be great if you, let's say, are working for Tempo and you'd like to add stream entries for any time someone tracks their time with your plugin. Or maybe you're working for Balsamiq and you want to associate all of your Balsamiq mockup activity with a given JIRA issue or Confluence space. If that's the case, these APIs are great for you. Let's take a look at a quick example. On the left, we've got a very simple Firefox extension named Poster, and on the right, we've got our activity stream. I'm going to be posting to our REST resource, which I'll give more details about in a moment. And I'll provide our custom JSON content type and a very simple JSON document as our request body. If I post that to the resource, you'll see we get a 201 created status response. Now, if we go and refresh our activity stream, we'll notice that the new activity has been added. The new activity says, Ben Woskow used the example plugin. It's that easy, a very simple post. Additionally, we're no longer limited to just JIRA content in this activity stream. As a result, if you go to the filters view, you'll notice that we have 2 available streams instead of 1. In addition to JIRA, we can also filter on and disable or enable the example plugin available stream. Yeah, I have a laser pointer. Awesome. So, that's a very simple example. Let's take a look at a more complex example. There are a lot of elements that you can either define or exclude if you like the default values. However, there are more elements that you can include in your requests. So here's a more complex example. Without going into detail on the elements right now, if we post it, we'll get this entry added to our activity stream. Now let's go through element by element. The first one, published. This is an optional element for your timestamp. If it's provided, you'll use it, such as here where we said September 28th, which was yesterday. If you want your streams entry to be added with the current timestamp, you can actually leave this element off, and that's the default value. The next element is actor. This should be a pretty obvious one. You provide a username. If the user exists on the system, the user will be resolved and their avatar will show up in the corner. If the user does not exist in the system, we'll then use either the default avatar or we provide the option for you specifying one. We allow you to specify an icon for your streams entry so that your streams entries can stand out from the rest. If you notice, JIRA issues, whether they're bugs or subtasks or improvements, they all had a very small icon right here to signify what kind of issue type they were. And your streams entries are no different. Personally, I am a huge baseball fan, so I decided my streams entry was going to be about baseball. Not really, but it's the first thing I thought of. We also have a generator element, and this element gets converted to the provider that's listed on your filters screen. So if you remember, we had two available providers, Jira and the example plugin, and this is where that information came from. We have the ID, which is a URL that gets hyperlinked to the timestamp, and probably the most obvious elements, title and content. Note that the content takes HTML, and you can't really see on this projector, but that's rendered as an HTML block quote. So you can provide HTML in your content, and it will get rendered accordingly. Also, though, if you notice, in our title and content, Joe Schmo is not hyperlinked. However, when we look up here, it is. Where did that magic come from? Well, if you remember, we specified that this entry was from the user Joe Schmo. And because that user was recognized, both resolved by the system and found in the title and the content, it automatically gets hyperlinked. Additionally, if you look, we have this issue key here, JRA9, which is not hyperlinked. And up here, it is. Same exact thing. That is because we specified a target element. And this target, we specified that this streams entry has to do with the issue JRA9. As a result, JRA9 gets hyperlinked. Additionally, because we associated this streams entry with JRA9, it appears on the issue page. So here we have our issue and our streams entry. Additionally, it also appears on the JRA9 project activity stream, and for good measure, on Joe Schmo's user profile page. To use the Activity REST API, you would hit the URL /rest/activities/1.0 after your base URL, and use our custom third-party JSON content type. All right, so let's take a look at the Java API. The Java API works just like the REST API, provides all the same functionality. It's just obviously a different interface for you to use it with. We provide one service, which you can component import into your plugin, the activity service. And this service has three methods that I'd like to talk about: post activity, get activity, and activities. They all honestly work just like you would expect them to. Post activity takes an activity and adds it to the system. Get activity takes an activity ID and returns the activity associated with that ID. And activities takes an activity query object containing all sorts of filters and pagination information and returns to you an iterable of activities matching your criteria. For more information on the Java API, please go to our tutorial and documentation, as well as check out our sample plugin using the API. So these APIs are awesome. However, like I said earlier, they don't support the advanced provider-specific filtering. Additionally, they're not really designed for pluggable in-stream actions. Technically, it is possible to implement in-stream actions for your streams entries produced with these APIs. However, because you don't have complete control over how the streams entries are created, it's very difficult to create solid, cohesive in-stream actions. So if you want to do so, I'd highly recommend the provider plugin API. Additionally, and very relevant, unless you have a DeLorean that can travel back to the future, you can't use them yet, because these two APIs are first available in Jira 5.0 or Confluence 4.1. You can download the beta 1 of Jira 5.0, but obviously Confluence 4.1 hasn't yet released any milestones. So let's take a look back at our first slide, comparing the three APIs. We just discussed the first two, the Activity REST and Java APIs. So now let's take a look at the much more powerful and more advanced provider plugin API. The provider plugin API allows you to develop your very separate plugins containing your very own Streams Provider implementation. Now, you might be wondering, what does this Streams Provider implementation look like in the UI? Well, you should actually be very familiar with them, because in fact, this is the same API that the integration team used to develop activity streams. So these 5 providers that you see here are using this API. Using the Provider Plugin API will allow you to do everything we just spoke about from the Activity REST and Java APIs, in addition to advanced filtering and pluggable in-stream actions. You might want to use this API if, let's say, you're adding streams entries for your plugin, or associating your streams entries with entities, just like the 2 use cases from the first APIs. In addition to, you might be developing the Glyphy plugin, and maybe you want to filter. I see you guys are smiling over here. You might want to filter between your UML streams entries and your flowchart streams entries. That's easily possible with this API. In addition, maybe you're developing the task list plugin, and you want to add check and uncheck in-stream actions so that you can automatically update your task lists directly from streams. All of this and more is possible. Using the Provider Plugin API is this simple. You add a single module to your atlassian-plugin.xml, and that module is the Activity Streams Provider. There are several submodules that you can add if you want to add additional configurations to your provider, but I'm only going to discuss one of them today, which is the Filter Provider interface. So first, the first module uses the Streams Activity Provider interface. This is by far the most important interface in the API. In fact, it's the one and only interface that's required for you to implement in order to use this API. This interface has one method you need to implement, getActivityFeed, and as you might guess, it takes an activity request containing all your filters and returns to you a streams feed. You might note, though, that it doesn't return a vanilla streams feed. In fact, it returns a cancelable task of a streams feed. And that's because searching through tons and tons of data can sometimes be difficult and sometimes not be performant. And we don't want the rest of your application to suffer because you're possibly chugging through all sorts of data. So as a result, we require that you return a cancelable task of a streams feed. And if your if your provider is taking more than the default timeout is 10 seconds, then we'll cancel your request and just return the streams with all other providers' content instead. The other interface that I mentioned earlier, that submodule for the filter provider, is the streams filter option provider. This interface has 2 methods, getFilterOptions and getActivities. Now, to explain these methods, I'd like to use an example. Let's say that I was on vacation for a few days, and I come back, and I want to see what bugs were created while I was gone. Seems fairly simple. Well, what's the best way to do so? I would argue by using activity streams. So here we have our activity stream. And if I go to the filters view, you'll see that only Jira is enabled. Again, we're only looking for bugs that were created, so this has nothing to do with the other providers. So we disabled them for the time being. We can add Jira-specific filters to hone in on the data that that provider returns. The first filter that appears is the activity filter. Every provider has some sort of notion of activity that goes on. For example, Jira, you can add attachments, you can add comments, you can close issues, create issues, and so forth. Every provider has this notion of activity. However, that the values of different kinds of activity differ for each provider. So we provide this getActivities method within your interface, and this method returns any kind of activity that's possible within your provider. So for this example, let's say that we only want issue creation events, and we'll add another filter. The next filter that pops up is the issue type filter. Valid values for this are subtask, story, bug, documentation, and more. Issue type is obviously very specific to Jira. It really doesn't make sense for any other provider. As a result, since it's a provider-specific filter, we can implement this filter using the getFilterOptions method. This returns an iterable of streams filter option, and each of these streams filter options is very specific for this provider. So for our example, we're going to select bug, and combining our two filters, if we save our configuration, you'll see that only bug-created events appear in my activity stream. That's on the right, whereas on the left, it's sort of difficult to see, but we have bugs being resolved as well as some subtasks. For more information on how to implement your own streams activity provider and do advanced filtering, please go to our tutorial and documentation, as well as check out our sample plugin. The sample plugin is pretty solid. What it does is it uses UPM's brand new API that we added specifically for this cause, and filters through all sorts of plugin events, such as enabling or disabling a plugin. So it's a very good example if you're interested in this. Now, let's take a look at Pluggable In-Stream Actions. Like I said earlier, Pluggable In-Stream Actions greatly improve the user experience for using your activity streams. And this is because it adds so much functionality to your activity streams. Instead of having to go to the issue pages that are linked, or the project pages, or to any linked content on your activity stream in order to execute an action, you can execute the action directly from your stream. All of the activity that gets executed is specific for the given entry on which the hyperlink appears. So some examples of in-stream actions. You might want to add a comment to your Jira issue or Confluence page or whatever the stream entry is. Perhaps you have a stream entry for committing a change set and you'd like to create a review from that change set. Or from my example earlier, perhaps you have entries for updating a task list and you'd like to check or uncheck those entries in your task list. All of that can be done with in-stream actions. This API is entirely JavaScript, and it can but doesn't have to exist within the same plugin as your provider plugin. In fact, this could exist as a standalone plugin if you wish. So here we are at our activity stream again. And to zoom in, to make sure you guys can see it, we have all these links. And since I think that issue is very interesting, I can click Watch. I've been successfully added as a watcher. If I wanted to vote on the issue, or if I wanted to comment on it, I could do the same exact thing. So how did we implement this? The most important part about in-stream actions is registering your JavaScript action with the activity stream's JavaScript engine. To do so, all you do is call activitystream.registerAction. This method takes 3 parameters: type, element, and sort by. Type is the type of streams entry that you want to bind your action to. For example, issue, page, review, or comment. Element is a function that's going to produce your hyperlink or HTML or whatever you want your action to be rendered as. And sort by is a weight so that you can sort your in-stream action with other in-stream actions for that stream entry. Let's take a look at how this register action function gets used. Here we have a very simple example. This JavaScript file, just a few files long, adds in-stream actions to any change set element so that you can create your reviews directly from your activity stream for any change set. We have a function, buildLink, and this buildLink function takes a feed item. The feed item might have a hyperlink with the rel value of change set review, and if it does, then this function returns a hyperlink with that URL. Then, if you look at the very bottom, you'll see that we call activitystreams.registerAction with the values change set, buildLink, the function that I was just speaking of, and then, for good measure, 5 as the sort value. To use your in-stream actions in your Atlassian-plugin.xml, all you do is add a streams action handlers component, a module. This module takes resource submodules just like the web resource module would. It works just the same way. And there are some additional features with in-stream actions that I'm not going to go in depth about, but I'd just like to mention that they do exist. For example, internationalizing your JavaScript can be very tricky. I know this has been mentioned in a few different talks already, but we've also implemented a very similar solution to what was mentioned earlier that allows you to very easily internationalize your JavaScript in-stream actions. Additionally, using AUI, we provide you a very easy way to add success and failure feedback to your in-stream actions. And for those in-stream actions that are taking quite a bit of time to finish, we allow you to display a spinner for your asynchronous task feedback. For more information on in-stream actions, you can take a look at our tutorial and documentation, or check out our sample plugin. So to recap, first we discussed what are activity streams, and I highlighted some of the new areas that we've been working on in recent months. We then discussed how to consume an activity stream and some of the benefits of doing so. And then we talked about how to add your own third-party content to your activity stream with our 3 different APIs: Activity REST, Activity Java, and the additional power that the Provider Plugin API allows you. And lastly, we discussed pluggable in-stream actions and how that improves your user experience. And at this point in time, I hope that you're all saying that you can't wait to start seeing your own plugin data in your activity streams. Thank you very much.